Hey Debbie, it's so great to see you again today. What is your topic for us today?
Well, today we are going to talk about betrayal brain. I
Ooh,
decided on this topic because at our last webinar, I asked some of the participants to share with me in our chat what their greatest struggles were. And one thing that came up was intrusive thoughts and emotional flooding. So I thought I would share a little bit today about what happens to the brain when betrayal is experienced, because there's neurological effects, there's psychological effects that the betrayed partner has no control over. It's because the brain is in survival mode. It's also important that the betraying partner understands what occurs with the betrayed partner's brain so that they can understand why they might be easily emotionally flooded, or why they might be stuck in their stories or have an overwhelming psychological response. So, when betrayal occurs, it shatters trust in an instant. And in that moment, the betrayed partner is flooded with rejection. And that starts the wheels in motion with the brain. So we do know that with betrayal, there's a lot of deep psychological wounds. There can be even lasting neurological scars, so to speak. So, for example, after my betrayal, I had anxiety that paired with my betrayal, and I still have a tendency towards more anxiety. So, that's what I mean by that. So, betrayal can actually reshape the architecture of our brain. So, that's why it's so important that we understand how the brain is impacted. And we don't often talk about the brain and the importance because it is a key to healing. So here's what I see in my office. I'll have betrayed partners come in and they'll say things to me like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I can't remember anything. Another thing they'll say is, I feel like I've lost me. I'm not the same person. Another thing I hear is the betrayed partner saying, I'm acting totally different than I've ever acted before. My thoughts are crazy. I can't control my anger. I am now cussing like a sailor, using words that I never, ever said before. And then another thing is the repetitive, stuck kind of thinking where I'm thinking over and over and over about what happened and I can't get out of it. Sometimes I'll even have the betrayed partners come in and report that the betraying partner says to them, you need to get over it. It's been 3 months. And of course, the betrayed partner is still experiencing a lot of triggers and emotional dysregulation. Another thing I've heard too is that sometimes the betraying partner might say, I don't even recognize you. I don't know who you are anymore. I just want you to go back to being the old you. So these are things I've actually heard in my office, and it's all because the betrayed partner's brain is under the attack, right? The survival that happens when betrayal occurs. So when there's a breach of trust in the relationship, right? It can come in all shapes and sizes, even within the betrayal experience itself. So, for example, I might have D-Day where I learn about sexual betrayal, and then in that betrayal, I might find out that finances have been used excessively. So now I have financial betrayal. Or I might even have a friend that I share my experience with, and they decide they're not going to be my friend any longer. I actually had somebody share that with me this week. So again, that's another betrayal within the betrayal. So the brain keeps getting activated and then reactivated. And of course, the brain automatically is going to go into some really intense emotions like fear and hurt and anger. And in the moment of betrayal, the betrayed person feels so vulnerable. So, again, like I said, we go into survival mode. The brain begins to function completely differently than before. And so, we have to learn to work with the brain. It's a game changer. It's got to be part of the healing recovery work that both the betrayed partner and the betraying partner does. Okay. So, how do we know our brain is shifting? How do we know we're moving into that? Well, typically we have some warning signs. So, there might be betrayal. And all of a sudden, my palms get sweaty, my heart rate increases, I might feel more anxiety, I might start to feel more shut down. The brain then moves into panic mode and it releases a lot of different hormones, particularly cortisol and adrenaline. Those are both stress hormones. So when we have a stress hormone release, then what happens is the body goes, blood pressure's got to go up, muscles have got to get tighter. So now we're going to move into fight, flight, or freeze. So I'm on high alert. Research shows that betrayed partners experience lots of exposure, prolonged exposure, to these stress hormones. And that's what changes the brain. So there's 4 areas of the brain that I want to talk about that are affected by betrayal. The first one is the amygdala. The amygdala are little almond-shaped structures that are in the temporal lobes of the brain, and this is our emotional processing center of the brain. So they just start firing. And when that happens, it's like the alarm bells go off. So as the alarm bells go off, the brain is sensing threat. It goes into fear. We go into the fight, flight, or freeze mode. And then what happens is emotions kick up and go into overdrive. So the amygdala causes the individual to be flooded with all those emotions that I just mentioned. And it may move the partner into feelings of, like I said, anger, which is fight, flight, which is run away, maybe have anxiety, or freeze. They might even shut down in the moment. It's like the emotional volume gets cranked up when the amygdala start firing, and all logic takes a back seat. There is no logic when the amygdalas are firing. So all functioning for survival begins in this moment. The amygdala is on high alert. It hijacks the prefrontal cortex, and we'll talk about that in a moment. That's the front part of our brain here. And when we're in this state and the amygdalas are firing, it's hard to calm down. We can't make decisions. There's no logic, reasoning, or emotional regulation at that point. It's all about emotions. Second area that happens is the prefrontal cortex shuts down. So this is the executive center of the brain. The brain shuts off, the brain goes offline. You might have heard it called that. And this is really the brain's decision-making headquarters. So when we can't make decisions, logic and reasoning go offline. There's no thinking, there's no planning, there's no decision-making. All there is a lot of emotional overwhelm and stress. So that's when impulsive reactions take over. The prefrontal cortex is no longer in charge. So betrayed partners, this is when you see them trigger. You might see them move into their anger. This is when maybe even their emotions take them into some of those behaviors I mentioned earlier, where they get angry, they might yell, they might call you names, they have no control at that point because they are in survival. It's almost like, because their ability to think is limited, it's like all or nothing. It's like all restraints go out the door, and I'm just going to say whatever I want. So that's because we're no longer connected to the prefrontal cortex, where we have logic, reasoning, emotional regulation, body regulation, and we have to be connected here for empathy. So higher functioning part of the brain. The third area that gets impacted is the hippocampus. This is the area where we have kind of like our memory filed. It gets overwhelmed. And so this area, when we have betrayal and we're in crisis mode, the other parts of my brain are functioning and firing, right? They're reacting now. The stress hormone like cortisol surges. Then what happens to the brain's memory center is it gets very overwhelmed, especially when there's a lot of emotional flooding. So what happens is there's a disruption to memory. So we can't remember things as betrayed partners. We can't get it straight. There's fragmented, there's foggy memories. I will have betrayed partners say they can't remember periods of time, but I also believe it engages, and then the betrayed partner goes into trying to put all the puzzle pieces together because I can't keep it straight. This is where I feel like it's so important, because the betrayed partner has such a difficult time making sense of the betrayal story, that formal therapeutic disclosure is so helpful. Because, like I said, they're trying to create a coherent narrative. They're trying to get it to make sense to them. And this is when you see a lot of betrayed partners going to safety seeking for the truth. And so they're trying to get all the facts and all the information. So if you can just understand that it's part of the brain that's firing, right? They're trying to, because it's not functioning at full strength, it's not making sense all the time. And so they're kind of stuck in that cycle. The last area we're going to talk about is the nucleus accumbens, which is part of the reward system in the brain. This is where relational safety resides in this part of the brain. And when it's functioning properly, this is where we feel like we can trust the other person, their social bonding. But what happens when there's betrayal is it becomes less responsive. So because it's now engaged, the betrayed partner has such a difficult time feeling secure, feeling trust, even when maybe the relationship does feel safe. Maybe even years down the road, and all of a sudden they get triggered, this part of the brain gets activated again. And sometimes you might even see that the partner will have mood swings. They will get emotionally flooded, or they might get completely disconnected and shut down. This area of the brain also makes the betrayed partner hyper aware of the cues. So if the betraying partner rolls their eyes, or if the words and actions don't match up, they notice all of those little things. This is where you see the betrayed partner going out in public with a betraying partner, and they go into their stories because they think they saw their betrayed partner's eyes look at a woman, and all the betraying partner remembers is, well, I remember looking in that direction, but I wasn't looking at them. I was kind of looking at the ground. And so this is where I see that we have it's the brain just there trying to keep you safe. So even neutral interactions that the betrayed partner is experiencing can be triggering. So if we can just understand that it's the brain trying to keep the betrayed partner safe, then the addict partner can support them in a different way. So what are some things that the betrayed partner and the betraying partner can do when their brains are hijacked? So the first thing you've got to do is we have to calm the amygdala. Remember, that's the emotion center of the brain. So we have to use grounding techniques. We talk all the time about having a self-care plan. It's really a brain care plan when you think about it, because so much of what we do is to help the brain regulate, to help the brain stay connected to prefrontal cortex. So we do practices like the 5 senses exercise. This works so well. You can do it when you're by yourself. You can do it in public. So as a reminder, 5 senses, we're engaging with our 5 senses by looking around and noticing 5 things we see. So now we're engaging our eyesight, right? Then we're going to notice what we feel with our physical body, not emotions. It's what's physically touching the body. So 4 things, 3 things that you hear, 2 things that you can smell or imagine smelling, 1 thing you can taste or imagine tasting. I like combining it with cross-body tapping. A lot of people now are getting the tappers that do the bilateral buzzing. Anything like that is going to really help calm the amygdala. Holding an ice cube. I've had clients who hold ice cubes. They've taken a break when they've gotten triggered in a couple session, and they'll go hold an ice cube, and that brings them back into their body, calms them down. Cold plunges are great for that. Ice cold showers, for those of you who are still in the parts of the country where it's cold, you go in and start with a warm shower, turn off the hot water, and stand in the cold and let it hit your neck so that you're stimulating the vagal nerve. So when we stimulate that nerve, it causes the parasympathetic nervous system to kick in, which is the calming part. So then the amygdala is calmed down. Deep belly breathing. We talk about box breathing. The reason we call it box breathing is because it's like in our mind, we're going to trace a box. So as we breathe in to the count of 4 slowly, we let the air go deep into our belly. We hold it for 4. We count slowly and exhale for 4, and then we hold it for 4. And as the diaphragm moves, it's stimulating that vagus nerve, and it's kicking in the parasympathetic nervous system. We want to do whatever we can to calm the body, because if we calm the body, then we can get the amygdala to also calm down. So whatever you find soothing. So if it's putting on music and having somebody talk you through something, then that's another great thing to do. So think about what is soothing for your body and then put together a plan. Make a list. I talked to somebody recently who's really struggling with getting triggered, and we talked about putting together their first aid plan. So they put together some things, some sensory things. They're making a list of how to do and what to do. So when our brain is offline and we're not connected to prefrontal, I can't think about what to do. I can't even remember. When I have a panic attack, all of my tools go out the door sometimes. So if I have it written in front of me, it helps me remember. The next thing you can do is mindful pausing and breath work. Breath work is so key because helps us engage the prefrontal cortex. So, couple of things. One of the things I teach groups and I teach my clients is creating a space between when we're triggered and when we respond. And in that space, we call it practicing the pause. So I know I'm triggered, and in that moment, I recognize it. So I have to be very aware of what my body feels like when I start to get triggered. I need to understand how my brain starts to function. For some of us, when we get triggered, we might have different body sensations, might feel an adrenaline rush. We might feel our brain get a little scrambled, tunnel vision. Just understand that you're starting to move into that trigger. And then you practice the pause. So how we do that is we do it with breathing. Now, just like I taught you, we've got the box breathing, we've got the 4-7-8 breathing. I love 4-7-8. And what I like to do is to count when I'm breathing. When I count, I connect to prefrontal cortex. So in my mind, I'm going to breathe to the count of 4 through my nose. And then I'm going to count out 7 as I exhale through my mouth. And then I'm going to hold it to the count of 8. So as I do that, I connect to prefrontal. I also like circle breathing. And with circle breathing, I will close my eyes, imagine there's a circle in my mind. And as I breathe in, I'm tracing to the top of the circle to the count of 4. And then I'm breathing down to the bottom of the circle to the count of 4. So I'm telling myself, breathe in, 2, 3, 4, and out, 2, 3, 4. And I will do that until I get to this place where my body feels comfortable, but I'm breathing as slowly as I can. Sometimes I also combine it with statements or affirmations. So I might say to myself in my mind, I'm peaceful, and do a circle breath. I'm calm, circle breath. I can handle anything, circle breath. I'm safe, whatever you need to hear. The brain will actually take it on. The more you do it, the brain starts to believe that messaging. And so it's very important. Thought stopping is another thing that we need to do because we're in our stories lots of times. Our stories can trigger us. So I'm thinking about a conversation I had with my betraying partner, or I'm back in my stories about it must be me and here's why they did what they did because I'm not good enough stories. And so with that, we've got to do thought stopping. I like doing thought stopping several ways. I like my clients to, first of all, start by just saying out loud when they're in their story, stop it. I'm not going to go there. That story's not completely true, right? And then what is true, and so we reframe it to something. What is true is I'm experiencing betrayal in this moment right now. I am safe because I'm going to step into doing my self-care tools, or I'm going to reach out to my friend and I'm safe. So we reframe it. I need to remind myself that my partner is in recovery. And as long as they're in recovery in this moment, I am safe. So when we reframe it, we get out of our stories, we see the body regulate more. We reconnect to prefrontal. I love meditative practices like guided meditation. I don't think it's easy when you're triggered to do your breathing and listening to music necessarily on your own. I love any kind of breath work that you can find online. There's a lots of great resources. So doing, 30 to 60 minutes of breath work where you're breathing very rapidly is another great way to reconnect the body. And then I love questioning your situation. Part of practicing the pause is just checking in and go, okay, what's my story right now? How can I change my story? How can I do it differently? How can I create a positive outcome? So I love taking that pause, right? Taking a breath and recognizing I'm starting to disconnect and working with my body, right? Connecting to prefrontal and asking the questions. The next thing you can do is somatic practices. This helps with the physiological arousal in the body, meaning the body feels sensations when we have trauma. So there's a lot of movement-based therapies, like you can do yoga. I love walking because walking has that bilateral stimulation. Biking does the same. I even have had my clients, I've told them, if you're having a lot of body sensations all over your body, turn on some music, crank on some music, get into a comfortable spot, and just shake your body. Because what we know about animals in the wild is when they experience trauma, they shake it off immediately. So the theory is our bodies hold on to a lot of the trauma, and shaking can help release it. Dancing is another great thing. Cranking up the music and dancing a lot is another form of shaking. Okay. Another thing I like to do is I like to be aware of where are the emotions at in my body? Where am I feeling those sensations in my body? So to do a body scan, check from the top of your head, working all the way down. Where am I feeling the emotions in my body? Sometimes you can even imagine it's a color and a shape. And then if you can, putting your hands to where it's at. I do a technique where I will have clients or myself. I just imagine all those sensations moving to the center of my body. This is from EMDR. And our emotions are nothing but energy, and they're going to move to the middle part of my body, and they're going to move in a circular direction. So I close my eyes and I imagine they're moving in a circular direction. And then what I do once I feel like everything's gathered up, I will stop it and have it go opposite. And I will tell my mind and my body to release it, let it go. And it's almost like it's unwinding and leaving my body. So that's another great visualization tool. Visualization tools can help us release distressing sensations and emotions. I will use things like healing colored light and have the colored light wash through your body and pour the sensations out the bottoms of your feet. We bury it in the earth and have it come back as a beautiful garden. Another thing I use is magnetic light, having it come in through that sensor in the top of your head and lifting the sensations and sending out to the center of the universe and creating a beautiful star filled with light. So all of those things, believe it or not, the brain actually responds to quite well. And we use that when we reprocess trauma. So those are ways we can use somatic practices, tuning into my body to calm down some of the physiological arousal. The other thing you can do is narrative therapy and journaling. Remember, I talked about the reward center of the brain and the nucleus accumbens, and how we have a hard time with stories and trying to our memories and keeping it straight. So this is really going to support not only that, but it's going to be support the hippocampus. It's going to support prefrontal cortex. It's going to support everything. And so, what's important is that you write about your experiences. A lot of people don't like to journal, but there's so much good research on how effective narrative therapy or journaling is. It's almost like you're doing your own personal therapy when you sit down and you write, how you're feeling. You could even structure it. It can even be things like, here was my trigger, right? Here's my negative thought. Here's my reframing thought. Here's what I'm going to do right now for self-care. It can be just free flow where you do a journal dump and get everything out. But it's really important that you do something with those thoughts if you're stuck in them. And to release them, I'm finding that doing a journal dump is one of the best ways. Write it until it's all out and nothing else comes out. And really, really working on getting out of your story is important. And that's one way to do it. So keeping track. I've had somebody come in this week and they brought out their phone and said, I know I'm not going to get this right because my brain's not working right. So I've made notes so I can remember. Sometimes that's what we have to do, and that's what journaling will help you with. Resourcing is another thing. Resourcing is a term that comes from EMDR, which means we're going to create some type of internal safety inside of ourselves. So we can use things like guided imagery. Again, I will do that where I have people imagine in their mind going to a peaceful, calm place. And in their minds, they go maybe to the beach or the mountains or somewhere they've been, that when they're there, they feel like they're in their body. They feel peaceful. They feel calm. And then we do a five senses exercise. And then we just imagine the calmness that surrounds them coming into their body. So there's lots of exercises like that that you can find on different apps like Calm and just any of those types of things. I like Insight Timer. That's another app where you can find that. I do a visualization with safe people. I bring in a healing team. And I imagine that in my safe place, I've got my people there and they're surrounding me and supporting me. That's another way to feel safe on the inside. I will have people bring healing colored light into their body. And as the light systematically flows down in their body, the muscles absorb the light and they're feeling that internal sense of peace and calm. Doing these types of things really anchors the nervous system. Another very helpful tool is to create a container visualization. So we do this at the end of an EMDR session where we imagine they've got a container in my office that they're going to open the container up and they're going to put the distressing events, the memories, the target memory, whatever it is, in that container and shut it. Sometimes we shrink it down and we tuck it away. So if you're having, some intrusive thoughts, you can imagine having a container, putting them in there, taking it to your safe place, leaving it there, taking it into your therapist's office the next time you go in. The next thing we have to do is self-compassion practices. Um, this is so important because there's a lot of negative self-talk when you're a betrayed partner. And we've got to soothe the inner pain. And we do that by trying to restore your sense of worthiness, having compassion for yourself. I could spend a lot of time on that. I would look into Kristen Neff and go to her website. Beautiful area for resources. You will find self-compassion exercises on the Calm app, on the Insight Timer app, on YouTube. So find some that when you listen to them, that it really feels comfortable, it feels good to you, it resonates with you. And then lastly, you want to get the right kind of therapy, especially when it comes to couples work, because we're trying to heal the reward system. So we want to have the appropriately trained therapist. I've mentioned in past webinars, I've had couples come in and they've gone to well-meaning therapists who don't understand addiction, betrayal trauma, and everything involved. And so it's very, very even more traumatic than it already is. So you want to find somebody who understands both addiction and addiction recovery and betrayal and healing from betrayal. That's very important. So you're going to want to find a couple who does something like maybe emotionally focused therapy. They might do something like the early recovery couples empathy model. So we're really focusing on empathy so that we're working on healing together. And everybody's therapist doesn't differently. I like bringing the couple together and working together early on because I think it's helpful. We want to regulate, we want to work together, we want to work on a formal therapeutic disclosure and doing that, and then working on repairing the relationship. Again, that's going to help create safety for the brain. So in conclusion, I just want to add a few points. Working on healing the brain is a really important aspect of recovery for both the betrayed partner and the betraying partner. It's all about brain work. And we didn't talk about the brain and the addict partner, which we will one of these days. But when the brain has experienced betrayal, the betrayed partner has no control over how the brain's going to react when it senses threat. And we don't have a timeline on it, unfortunately. It's just going to happen. But if we can kind of look at the betrayed partner through the lenses of this is their brain keeping them safe, then we can approach them from a stance of more compassion. I always call it through the lenses of compassion, and we can help that individual feel more safe. So that's my thoughts for today because I've had a lot of this show up in my office lately.
And it's so helpful. And you gave so many different tools. And I really appreciate, just the different aspects of identifying what the brain is doing and what is not doing, if it gets hijacked at those moments. And, and I hear, like you hear, I can't remember anything, like all of those things that are very disconcerting for a partner. They're already going through betrayal trauma now. Like, I can't remember anything. I can't, I'm saying and doing things that I would never do, like all of those things. So it feels like it adds another, like, oh my gosh, it's even worse, and so getting some tools that can help, regulate, and get things, back on some track. Of course there's things, one of the things you talked about, the brain starts to believe, when you're saying positive things. And I was talking to a partner the other day, and like she was like kept repeating what the addict partner was saying, which was not positive. And I said, I'm going to invite you journal about that and dump it, and then um, just re-put or put in good things, because I said, I'm concerned that your brain is believing the negative stuff the more you say it. And so when you were saying, if when you're doing positive, the brain will start to believe it. And I was going, I think that there's really some truth in, whatever you're telling yourself, even if it's words that someone else is saying that are negative, our brains can start to go, oh, that must be true. So I think it's important to make sure we're paying attention to, even what we're saying about what we're repeating about someone else. The journaling, you talked about that, and it's so important to do that. And you've shared in the past where sometimes it's journaling and sometimes it's setting it aside, and then, going back and going, look how far I've come. But sometimes it's burning it or shredding it or whatever, so having the ability to identify, yet I'm putting, like your box that you're talking about. I love the idea of shrinking it too, not making it really minimal, but and then setting it aside. So many tools to use. I hope people are paying attention to this, and gathering things. But I think the real big key with this is, like you talked about your first aid kit. Well, your first aid kit might look different than my first aid kit, because what works for you may not work for me. Or, these are the 5 things that feel most to resonate with me. And that's why it's important for each person to identify some things that work for you. And you know what? If you try something and it doesn't work, that's okay. There's 1,000 other things, and so just keep trying things, until you go, yeah, that one works. But even in the moment, if you go like, well, these 5 things usually work for me, and this one's not working so well, or I'm in a place where I can't utilize that one, then you've got other things. You've got a backup plan. You got to have a plan, because like Debbie said, once you get into that moment, if you have to try to remember what it is that you're going to have it on your phone, have it where you can get it and know that I'm going to go look there. I'm just looking at the list. I bet I will start to go, oh, wait, there's help, and I think that'll be useful too. So,
Yeah, let me add a couple things about the
please,
brain.
yeah.
You said something that kind of reminded me of this. When a betrayed partner keeps getting triggered over and over again, right? Remember, the brain's just doing it because the brain has a negative bias. And so the brain's always looking for the bad because that's a threat. It's a threat to staying alive. And so that's why then the betrayed partner triggers. And sometimes they have a lot of shame because they think, what's wrong with me? I can't get over this. And I should be doing
Mm,
better. It's been 8 months, and so we have to recognize that the shame component can come in, and like I mentioned, self-compassion is a good time to use that. The other thing, I liked what you said about the first aid kits. Keep it simple. That was a thing I thought
mm,
of because we have
yeah.
a tendency to get it really, really complicated. Find 3 or 4 things that work for you and get really good at that. So,
Hmm.
want to use whatever regulates your body.
And with the first part of what you said, it's 8 months, and why can't I regulate? How often do we hear that from the addict partner too? It's been 8 months. I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do, and my partner is still, dysregulated and everything else. So, so that could be another negative message that's coming into the betrayed partner of like, kind of like, why aren't you over this? Because you're not, and but some self-compassion, and I love that you were talking about, this is, self-care is brain care. And I was like, I mean, like, what a great way to look at it. It's like, I am going to take care of like the most important thing. And, and even with the negative bias, it's like, darn, I wish we had a positive bias, but that, for us as human beings wouldn't keep us safe, because we would, go into dangerous things. So our brain is going to think everything's dangerous. So I have to be looking for danger, but this is a process. This is a path. So, like, if you're just joining and this is like, you're new to all this, please understand, we want to give you tools to use. We want to give you support that will actually be helpful on this journey, so that you're getting resources that matter, and connections that matter. So, first question, our does already having a does already having a diagnosis of PTSD, anxiety, and chronic depression from childhood sexual and physical abuse make more difficult to overcome betrayal and betrayal brain? Are there other things I can do to work through the betrayal emotions and thoughts? That's a great question.
A really good question. And the answer to that is yes, it does make it more difficult at times because we're And I use the analogy of the trauma tree, which kind of explains it. And that is, I tell my clients they're a lot like a tree. So when they present in session, I'm looking at their leaves and their branches, which
Mm.
situations and the symptoms that they're experiencing. And so we have to look. So for you, it's I've had PTSD, I have anxiety, I have chronic depression, right? If you and I just worked on that, we're managing it and we're like trimming back your leaves and your branches. So we have to look at the trunk of the tree, what's supporting the leaves and the branches. And so with trauma, it's the wiring in your brain. It's your brain has taken all those traumatic experiences and it's kind of sorted it by categories and it's created a theme around each category. So it's going to be something like I can't trust, I'm not safe, I'm not deserving, I'm not good enough. And so when something similar comes along in life, so I've already had similar trauma. Now I have betrayal trauma. My brain goes right back into that file, that area of the brain where it's stored, and it works from there. And it pairs with a body response. So when I have trauma, I have body sensations. My brain is no longer functioning connected to the most advanced or mature part of the brain or prefrontal cortex. Instead, I'm limbic. I'm in fight, flight, or freeze. I'm in that primitive part of the brain. And so I process differently as well. And so we have to look at, gosh, what is that negative belief that when unconsciously the brain senses it, you go right back into all the old thinking patterns, the body sensations, and then we have to go deeper and get to the root of the tree. Okay, so what either created that negative belief or has added to that negative belief? So in your trauma tree, I would put a root that's got betrayal trauma. I would have a root that's got sexual trauma, maybe physical trauma or childhood trauma, whatever it is. The thing is the brain to the brain, it feels the same because I'm back in that file, right? That's I can't trust or I'm not safe. So, are there things that you can do to overcome this and work through it? Absolutely. This is where you really have to have a good therapist who understands betrayal. I am such a believer in we have to reprocess the trauma or we have to work through the trauma. We have to work with the brain and the body. So it would be things like eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing, which is EMDR. So we go back and we go back to those target memories and we let the brain in the present moment connected to prefrontal, we identify parts of the trauma while we're holding, the tappers. Another one is accelerated resolution therapy, which is kind of a visualization tool where you clear sensations from the body as you're processing. Another one is brain spotting, where we find, what we're working on, we activate the body and we actually find the spot where it feels more intense, where you stare and it kind of accesses it and that works through the body as you talk about it and as it's releasing. So, those are the types of things you're going to need to do. If you can identify the negative beliefs, right? Understand what they are, the stories that they take you into that then trigger you, then you can start working on thought stopping, reframing the story. You can do the somatic work I talked about. But because you've had so many other things and you have more complex trauma because you've had additional, then you do want to find a good trauma therapist. It will make all the difference in the world. And you will find that those symptoms decrease, right, as you're working through the trauma. It's not easy work, but it is so worth it. That was such an important component of my own healing. So I can't, I just really believe that I couldn't have gotten to where I'm at without it. So I'm hoping that's helpful for you. Again, self-compassion work is really important for somebody who's had the kind of trauma you've had, which sounds kind of counterintuitive, right? It's somebody else who hurt me, right? Why do I have to heal me, right? They should be healing me, especially my betraying partner. But that self-compassion is so important.
So what I'm hearing, and I love the tree analogy, that was, a useful visualization. But what I'm hearing is, if a betrayed partner comes to you and all you're doing is talking about this stuff, at some point, like you'll feel a little bit better, maybe, but in order to really get to this and to come through it, it's going to take, stabilize this and then start working on addressing the root decay. I'm going to call it that way.
Have to. I find that people get stuck up in the leaves
Mm.
and branches. And so that's
Oh,
been
that's
a good
true.
take on. And again, I work with the brain. I believe the brain, I believe our brain wires from the time it takes in data. And in the early days, our brain is just like an open computer. It just takes it all in. It doesn't filter anything out until we're about 8 or 10 years old. We have a little more critical thinking and we can filter a little more. So the brain rewires at a young age, and those negative beliefs that I talked about, those assumptions the brain makes, start early and they can get reinforced, later on down the road with betrayal. So,
Yeah.
yeah, you're right. Exactly.
But like Debbie said, it's work, but it's so worth it. So I hope if you don't have a qualified professional, email Tammy, TAMI at seekingintegrity.com. Let me know this situation, but also where you're located so I can help you find somebody that would be qualified. What boundaries can I enact with a sex addict who sexually offends and is still an active threat when I'm the only force keeping him in line, keeping women safe until I get legal involved? Divorcing and likely should report. Currently, no contact, but a ET boundary that I'll pull out of divorce mediation and report him immediately if he doesn't abide by the safety measures set forth by our therapist. He is still towing the line. I feel overwhelmed with this responsibility. I feel overwhelmed with the responsibility you're carrying on just reading this. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Um, First of all, I want to say first of all, I want to validate how hard that is. Just
Yes.
responsibility and the overwhelm. I can't even imagine. It's probably paralyzing at times, and it feels really, really big because what you wrote felt really, really big. I'm grateful that you have a therapist and that you've got safety measures. That would be one of the things that you have a safety plan put together. So, a lot of this is going to be about internal boundaries, we're going to talk about for just a few minutes. Remember, internal boundaries, the boundaries I put in place for myself to follow. So, when I follow those boundaries, I'm keeping not only myself safe, but I'm also keeping other people safe. And so, with internal boundaries here, I I would hope that you have more support. That would be one of the internal boundaries that I'd want you to have. So you're not carrying the whole thing. Can you find a support group? Do you have individuals in your lives that are safe, that are there when you're struggling, that you can turn to, that you can talk to? I talk about this often in my webinars. I identify different people for different things. So when I need a person who is very logical, I turn to my logical friend. When I need somebody who is there just to let me just vent, they can hold space for that. But you really need a lot of help. I'm hoping not only do you have a therapist, but you also have those friends, some kind of a support group if you can find one that fits your needs. Um, and I also think it's important for you because it sounds like there's legal involved, that you have some type of legal support. So you're guided along the way. I think that the more people you have surrounding you, the less overwhelming it's going to feel. The other thing you're going to have to do as an internal boundary is a lot of self care. So that means you're going to have to really work with your body and releasing it, whether that means you go out and exercise or you're doing somatic work, breath work, those types of things when you're feeling overwhelmed. Not pushing yourself. You must be in a state of hypervigilance as well. So that's really hard. When you're in hypervigilance, you're in that limbic part of your brain. So anything that's going to calm the brain down. But again, I just go back to when we are so overwhelmed with such a big responsibility, we really need to have our healing team assembled and people we can turn to. Do you have any other thoughts on that, on Tammy?
Well, I was trying to remember because there's an organization, and I was looking for a couple things, but there is some support for loved ones of offenders, and I just can't think of it right now. I will keep looking for that. I guess my question is, therapists are, are the mandatory reporters, and so I'm kind of questioning if the therapist is not aware of some of these things. I don't know. I'm not trying to make more of an issue, but I had to, I mean, therapists are mandatory reporters. So if there's something going on, that is an issue, that the therapist for their license, should be at least contacting their licensing authority so that they can identify if they need to report or not. So, but yeah, like I can only, you must feel like Hercules with the world on your shoulders. And I'm like, you know, I, yeah, I hate that you feel like you're responsible for all women to be, or all people to be safe or whatever, but yeah, all women to be safe. But like, what do you need to do to take care of you, in all of this too, having support, but like maybe you need a report. I have no idea. This one is so complicated. I hope you have really good support and help and people that can just listen to you, and hold space for you.
Yeah, and I saw that you added a little sheet,
Oh,
you added a
please.
little more.
Yeah.
And it's like, what boundaries do I set with him? You've got to look at it through the lenses of safety. And so we're trying to keep you
Oh,
safe,
wow.
women safe. And I think there needs to be some clearly verbalized external boundaries where if you do this, then I'm going to report you or I'm going to file for divorce. Have you clearly outlined that? I know it's very, very scary. I know that there's a lot of fear there, but I think you have to have a lot of clarity that, these boundaries have got to be abided by. But the number one thing is you've got to create safety for yourself and other women, even if that means you're holding to a really, really hard boundary, like reporting him. And I'm not
Yeah.
sure what his particular behaviors are, so I can't give you specific boundaries. But again, if you can look at it through the lenses of safety, yes, it feels like control. You're having to control him, but boundaries aren't about control. They're about creating safety. Yes, to the other person, it might feel like control, but it's just so important that we keep you and everybody else safe.
Well, and I almost feel like it's a conflict because if I work on keeping myself safe and not abandoning me, other women are at risk, that's a really tough position to be in. And she added, she's confused as to why the marriage therapist and the CSAT have not reported. I feel abandoned individually and as a woman. So, any thoughts on that particular?
Well, I think the abandonment piece is going to be you're going to have to find women, a group of women who can have empathy and validate you and show you support. Because I think when you're feeling unheard of even and unsupported in certain areas of your life, you might even, I know it's hard to change therapists, but just kind of evaluate. Maybe even go to the therapist you currently have and ask them those same questions. Tell them I feel abandoned, right? Not only individually, but as a woman. And why is this not happening? Maybe you have, but I think we have to be in a case like this very forthright and very open because again, it goes back to we are creating safety. Um,
And she added, he's halfway abiding the boundaries, but he's so secretive and hard to catch. He takes non-consensual illicit photos, masturbates to women in public, goes through their things to steal their thongs, does it at work and in public. So,
yeah, and the thing is you can't be in all places at all times. So, and part of it's going to be, in a way, we have to kind of take a little step back, going that if he's doing it, then I will eventually find out. And if I find out that he's doing this, this, and this, then I'm going to report, or then I'm going to, and making sure that he understands.
so here, and she adds that his parents and family are minimizing, and I'm so broken. But I'm more like, like these are the guys that get caught. Like, like he's secretive to a degree, but it's high risk behavior if you're doing this in public and at work. Somebody, I mean, your boss walks in on you, or whatever. And in public, I mean, these are the guys that get caught, and then they have, then they it isn't even you having to report. So I want to flip this to what are, we talk about boundaries, and one of them is, physical, emotional, financial, and spiritual or relational. And I'm like, this could be are you okay financially? Are you okay? Because if this makes the front page of the news. I know nobody reads newspapers anymore, but you get the analogy of like, if this is on the local TV station, what are you going to do to take care of you? And I would really invite you to consider from that standpoint too. So, but this is, I mean, I'm telling you, we hear this all the time, and those are the guys, that there are two sex offender programs, that we refer to when there's this kind of acting out. That's probably a better fit, and I'm really sorry for you. And please, please, please take care of you.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. I got to get to, okay. I am now coming to deal with betrayal to realize I have a lot of betrayal roots, including my child's father, my ex-husband. I am removed from that relationship for many years, but along the way, I fell apart during the custody mediation. I was diagnosed with PTSD. While I was highly functional before, despite degrees of trauma, the last one broke the camel's back. I have an EMDR therapist and I'm active in recovery for adult children. But my question is, how do I regain a level of functionality and increase it back to what it was before PTSD?
Okay. So I'm going to tell you what, when I have a client that would come in with some of those things, what we would explore and talk about to get back to functionality. Number one is we've got to increase your window of tolerance, how much stress your brain can take. When we have trauma, it's very narrow. Sometimes we have to support the brain, and you're right. I think the next thing talks about, we can see trauma in MRIs or, even SPECT scans, we can see the effects of it. And so one of the things we might have to do is support the brain. And with that, I have them go to a psychiatrist who understands betrayal trauma, who's very conservative with how they use medications. But sometimes the brain can't function properly. It can't get a wide window of tolerance, meaning how much stress it can handle, until we give the brain more serotonin. And there's a lot of medications out there right now that don't have a lot of side effects. Some of them have been around for a number of years. So you want somebody who really understands the medications and does it slowly. We want medications like that will reduce the depression, that will cause the anxiety to come down, that are not addictive. Now, the brain can become dependent on the serotonin, which isn't a bad thing. It's just that we don't go off it abruptly. We always refer to our healthcare provider to guide us on that. That's one way. Another way is that every day you're going to have to be doing a lot of self-care. Continue with your EMDR. I don't know how much time has been since everything really hit. It sounds like you really fell apart doing the custody mediation, which is so hard. And it might take time. It might take, I worked on my betrayal stuff for 3 years post betrayal to get through all the different layers and roots of my betrayal. The other thing I would recommend too is, can you look back and see how far you've come? Sometimes that's another helpful thing. But it goes back to, I really believe that we have to have our team of people. We can't do it alone. And a lot of times my functionality increased when I made connection with other people. So I had to have a support group. I joined a support group and I had a couple of the women that I became very close to. So when I was struggling, I turned to them. They helped me function in the moment. It might be, people you trust, friends. It could be if you have a church, it's somebody at your church. But the functionality, it's going to take a while. I hate to say that, but it's going to be an active thing you have to do. It just is not going to happen. And just have a lot of patience with yourself. Again, it kind of goes back to when you're having a bad day, put a plan in place so you know what to do.
And I love it. And you've talked about having your tribe of people and things. And I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and she had a particular project that she'd been procrastinating on. She has this friend, and she was like, she came over, and like she would ask her a question about like, keep it, give it away, whatever. And she paused for more than 2 seconds. She said, "Oh, too long," and and it was gone. But they have that kind of a relationship. They built that kind of a relationship, and it's like, but that was like a place where she was stuck. I can't clean this particular area. It's overwhelming. And getting friends that'll sit with you and in the room and help you sort through things is, is a good one. So,
Mhm.
okay. My understanding is that trauma caused by betrayal and emotional abuse can be seen in the brain imaging like a functional MRI. If physical and sexual abuse is illegal and can be prosecuted, why is the emotional abuse not treated this way? What are your thoughts on social, political, legal, healthcare, and justice? We're going to skip this last one and about all the political but
It's hard. I just want
yeah,
to make a note on that. I had somebody come in this week. We talked about emotional abuse and how, it's on a spectrum. It really is.
yeah.
It's on a spectrum. And so we kind of talked about that a little bit. And the hard thing is like we know when we have something like physical abuse, right? There's evidence. And that's the problem with emotional abuse. There's not evidence. And we can't prove that it hurts. And that is to me one of the hardest parts of betrayal. And that is healing from that. Because a lot of that emotional stuff, again, goes right into the root of our trauma tree. And we have to spend a lot of time repairing that type of abuse. And for many of us, it starts even in childhood. So,
Well, and I put the link for should I say or should I go and I forgot why it was a question or whatever, but the fourth one was on the legal aspects of it. And Stuart Leviton is our COO and also a mental health professional. And he's like, if you think the legal system is going to help you with, emotional things, like they're not cut out for it. Like, Debbie said, it's on a spectrum. And oh my gosh, if everybody, had to go get a brain scan to see, look, I have this. And now how do you identify that it's that person and their behavior? I mean, like, oh my goodness, I can't even imagine how twisted up the legal system would be and how poorly they would do it. And I would rather support all of us working on healing ourselves and reaching out a hand and helping others heal, as a way of like, how do we stop this? We help each other get the support we need so that we can feel better ourselves, but we can also help people, not, there's so many vulnerable people that, end up because of, horrific histories and things like that, then end up in situations that just compound it. If we
well,
interrupted that, it'd
yeah,
be
I want to
helpful. Yeah.
say we do need to discuss it because I see that, she mentioned it truly needs to be discussed. I agree. I think,
I don't want to talk about political stuff.
yeah.
We don't talk about politics on this at all. So I want to keep it out of political. So if you want to talk about, other aspects of it, but the legal system, that's not us. The political system is not us.
But I want to talk about the emotional aspects of abuse. I think that oftentimes, even as a therapist, I try to educate my clients as to what emotional abuse is, what it looks like. I mean, there's a lot of assessments we can do. Unfortunately, emotional abuse is one of those things that is, you know, it's really hard sometimes to truly understand it because it does, like I said, it's on that spectrum. But I think we have to put words to it. And one of the things I do as a therapist is I really work with my clients on putting words to it and to speaking up and putting boundaries in place to create the emotional safety. Because a lot of women come in when I first see them, not even understanding that what they're experiencing is emotionally abusive. It's really unfortunate. And I am such an advocate for women and in healing in those areas.
So yes, and we have brain scans and the impact on our daily living. And a court's going to look at how can you identify that brain scan is from that person, not from 10 years ago or your ex, whatever. I mean, but you get to choose where you want to concentrate your effort. I really want to work on helping people heal, and be on a path. And the person that as the offender struggle says he controls my finances. I left my job for his promotion, and that's yes. So that's why I put this. Should I stay or should I go? The mediation. She talks about what you need to do in order to get kind of a plan and things like that. So you check that out and see if that's useful. So if people want to take on the political and legal system, rock on. But yeah, we're going to work on helping people heal. Hopefully more than one person at a time. Thanks, Debbie, for all of this great content. I got 2 pages full again. So we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks, everyone. We've got some special edition things coming out again. So stay tuned. Bye, everyone.